Medieval peasants lived longer and healthier lives than we think, despite having zero access to modern medicine. Their secret weapon? 10 powerful plants that most people today kill with weed killers, completely unaware they're destroying natural medicine cabinets worth thousands of dollars. Meet the stinging nettle, nature's unexpected warrior. It's covered in tiny hairs that pack a sting sharp enough to make you think twice before picking. But medieval peasants didn't just avoid it. They cooked it up, knowing this fierce plant was loaded with iron, vitamins, and healing powers that kept them going strong through harsh seasons. Stinging nettle was the ultimate medieval multitasker. These green warriors grew everywhere, shooting up in spring like nature's alarm clock. Medieval peasants probably thought modern people were pretty soft for complaining about paper cuts when they were out there barehanded battling vegetables that bite back. The secret weapon against nettle's sting was simple: boiling water. Once you tossed these prickly greens into a bubbling pot, they turned from foe to friend. Smart peasants would gather whole baskets of nettle in early spring when the leaves were young and tender. This humble weed packed more nutrition than most plants peasants could afford to grow. Each serving delivered serious amounts of iron, calcium, vitamin A, and vitamin C. For people whose daily meals consisted mainly of bread, nettle was like hitting the medieval jackpot. Medieval people used nettle to ease joint pain and fight bone-deep tiredness. They'd brew nettle tea or add cooked leaves to hearty stews. Some regions even figured out how to turn nettle into fabric. Talk about getting your money's worth from a weed that most people today would spray with chemicals. Today, nettle is still considered a superfood in herbal medicine circles. The same plant that kept medieval peasants healthy is probably growing somewhere near you right now, just waiting for someone brave enough to give it a try. But there's another medieval favorite that was even more popular when the cold season hit. When medieval peasants felt a cold coming on, they didn't run to the pharmacy. Instead, they turned to dark purple berries that grew on bushes all around them. Elderberries became the medieval equivalent of chicken soup, except they actually worked better and didn't require catching a chicken first. These small, tart berries packed a serious punch against illness. Medieval families would spend late summer picking clusters of elderberries, their fingers turning purple from the juice. The berries were too sour to eat fresh, but once cooked into syrups, they became liquid gold for fighting sickness. Smart peasant families made elderberry syrup every year before winter. They'd simmer the berries with honey, creating thick, dark syrup that kept for months. When someone started sniffling, out came the elderberry medicine. Medieval peasants were basically doing what expensive cold medicines try to do today, but they were doing it centuries before anyone figured out what a virus even was. Studies now show that elderberries can actually shorten cold symptoms by several days. The vitamin C in elderberries was especially important during medieval winters. Scurvy was a real threat when fresh fruits disappeared. Elderberry syrup helped people avoid the bleeding gums and weakness of vitamin C deficiency. The only tricky part was making sure you picked the right ones. Getting this wrong was like playing medieval Russian roulette, but with berries. Medieval peasants had to learn the difference between safe elderberries and similar-looking berries that could make you sick. It's funny how something that used to be completely free has become a premium health product. Modern elderberry supplements are now sold everywhere as expensive immune boosters. While elderberries helped medieval people stay healthy above ground, there was another powerful plant they dug up from beneath their feet. Medieval peasants were excellent at finding food where modern people wouldn't think to look. While we walked past perfectly good plants, they were digging up dinner from underground. Burdock root was one of their favorite buried treasures. This wasn't your typical root vegetable you could pull up with your hands. Burdock roots grew deep and thick, sometimes reaching down 2 feet. They were basically doing CrossFit centuries before anyone called it that, except their reward was dinner instead of a gym selfie. These long, brown roots looked unremarkable when first pulled from the ground, but once cleaned and prepared, burdock root added hearty flavor and serious nutrition to peasant meals. Medieval cooks discovered that burdock root worked perfectly in broths and stews. The root would simmer for hours, releasing earthy flavor and becoming tender. When meat was scarce, burdock root helped make vegetable stews more satisfying. What medieval people didn't know was they were eating a powerhouse of beneficial compounds. Burdock root contains inulin, a special fiber that feeds good bacteria in your digestive system. Medieval peasants were accidentally taking care of their gut health centuries before anyone understood what gut bacteria were. The plant was like a medieval Swiss Army knife, except instead of tiny scissors, it had roots, leaves, and seeds that could solve different problems. Medieval healers used burdock root for blood purification, noticing that people who ate it regularly had fewer skin problems. One of the best things about burdock was that it grew like a weed, which technically it was. Medieval peasants could find burdock growing in waste areas, along paths, and near buildings without any care. Modern Asian cuisine still use burdock root regularly. The same root that medieval peasants dug from roadside ditches is now packaged and sold as a premium health product. While burdock root helped medieval peasants stay healthy from the inside out, there was another root vegetable that painted their world brilliant red. Long before energy drinks existed, medieval peasants had discovered their own natural performance booster growing in their gardens. Beetroot was the original pre-workout supplement, except it came from the ground and turned everything it touched brilliant red. Their hands, cutting boards, and probably half their kitchen would end up looking like a crime scene every time they prepared beets. But the results were worth the colorful mess. Medieval peasants noticed that people who ate beetroot regularly seemed to have more energy and stamina for physical work. They didn't understand the science, but they were observing the effects of natural nitrates that improve blood flow and oxygen delivery. Medieval peasants were basically doing performance nutrition centuries before sports science existed. Modern athletes now spend serious money on beetroot supplements. The same compounds that help medieval peasants work longer are now used by marathon runners. The iron content in beetroot was especially important for medieval people, particularly women who were often iron deficient. Beetroot helped fight anemia and supported healthy blood production. Medieval families learned that beetroot was one of the best vegetables for winter storage. The roots kept well in cool root cellars, maintaining nutrition and flavor for months. The only downside to eating lots of beetroot was that it could turn your urine pink or red, which probably caused quite a few medieval health scares before people figured out the connection. Growing beetroot was relatively easy compared to other crops. The plants were hardy and could tolerate cooler weather. Medieval peasants probably considered beetroot their version of candy, which says something about how different their treat expectations were from ours. Modern research has confirmed what medieval peasants observed about beetroot's performance benefits. Studies show beetroot can improve athletic performance, lower blood pressure, and support heart health. While beetroot added color and energy to medieval meals, there was another plant that brought both nutrition and wine to peasant tables. What modern homeowners spend money trying to eliminate from their lawns, medieval peasants considered a grocery store growing outside their door. If dandelions were people, they'd be the kind of friend who always shows up when you need them most, except they also happen to be really good for you. Medieval peasants used every part of the dandelion plant. The bright yellow flowers that modern people see as weeds were valuable ingredients. The leaves provided fresh greens when other vegetables were scarce. The roots could be dug up and used throughout the year. Fresh dandelion leaves were eaten raw in spring when young and tender. The slightly bitter taste added variety to monotonous diets. When leaves got older and more bitter, medieval cooks would boil them and add to soups and stews. Medieval peasants were getting serious nutrition from what we now pay landscapers to remove from our yards. Dandelion leaves are loaded with vitamin K, vitamin A, calcium, and antioxidants that support bone health and vision. Medieval people would dig up dandelion roots, clean them, and roast them over fires until dark brown. These roasted roots could be ground up and brewed like coffee, creating a bitter but warming drink. It was basically the original alternative coffee, except it grew for free in every field instead of costing $5 at a specialty shop. Medieval families also turned dandelion flowers into wine and syrup. The yellow petals were collected in large quantities, usually by children, then fermented into mildly alcoholic wine or cooked into golden syrup. The best thing about dandelions was that they were basically indestructible. They grew in poor soil, survived drought, came back after being cut, and spread naturally without help. They're probably the most democratic plant on earth, growing equally well for rich and poor. Modern health food stores now sell dandelion supplements and teas for liver support and detoxification. While dandelions provided year-round nutrition in various forms, Medieval peasants had another vegetable that became their winter survival strategy. When medieval peasants needed a vegetable that could outlast winter and keep them healthy during the coldest months, they turned to cabbage. Cabbage was basically the medieval equivalent of a reliable old truck that starts every morning, except instead of transportation, it provided nutrition when nothing else would. Fresh cabbage was valuable during growing season, but its real magic happened through fermentation. Making sauerkraut turned ordinary cabbage into a winter superfood that could last for months in storage. Medieval families would harvest cabbage in late fall, then spend days shredding it and packing it into containers with salt. Medieval peasants were basically running sophisticated microbiology labs in their kitchens, except they had no idea they were doing science. The vitamin C in both fresh and fermented cabbage was a literal lifesaver during medieval winters. Scurvy was a real threat when people went months without fresh fruits or vegetables. Cabbage provided the vitamin C needed to prevent bleeding gums, weakness, and death. Fermented cabbage created probiotics that supported digestive health and immune function. Medieval people noticed that families who ate fermented cabbage regularly seemed to stay healthier during winter months. The only real challenge with cabbage was that it could make your house smell like a medieval locker room when you cooked it. Medieval cooks learned to balance cooking time and ventilation. Cabbage soup became a staple of medieval peasant cuisine. Medieval cabbage soup was probably the original one-pot meal, except the pot was clay and heated over an open fire. Modern research has confirmed many health benefits medieval people observed from eating cabbage. The vegetable contains compounds that may help fight cancer, support heart health, and reduce inflammation. While cabbage kept medieval peasants healthy through harsh winters, there was another crop that provided both nutrition and raw materials for daily life. Medieval peasants were masters of finding plants that could do double duty, and nothing exemplified this better than flax. It was like having a plant that could feed you and clothe you, which was pretty much the medieval version of winning the lottery. The tiny flax seeds were nutritional powerhouses that medieval cooks incorporated into daily meals. These small brown seeds could be ground into flour, added to bread dough, or stirred into porridges. Medieval bakers discovered that adding flax seed to bread provided extra nutrition and helped bread stay fresh longer. Medieval peasants were accidentally following what modern nutritionists now call the perfect anti-inflammatory diet, except they were doing it centuries before inflammation became a buzzword. They were consuming one of the richest plant sources of omega-3 fatty acids available. Flaxseed was incredibly high in fiber, with just 1 tablespoon containing nearly 3 grams. This helped medieval people maintain healthy digestion despite diets heavy in grains. Medieval women particularly benefited as the seeds contained compounds that help balance hormones. Processing flax into linen fabric was labor-intensive work that probably made modern people's complaints about doing laundry seem pretty silly. The flax stalks had to be soaked, beaten, combed, and spun before weaving into cloth. Growing flax required cooler climates and specific soil conditions, making it perfect for many medieval European regions. Flax was basically the agricultural equivalent of a reliable friend who thrives in situations where others would complain. The dual-purpose nature of flax made it especially valuable for peasant families with limited land. A single crop could provide both nutritional and practical benefits, maximizing return on precious garden space. Modern flaxseed products are now sold worldwide, marketed for their omega-3 content and fiber benefits. The same seeds that medieval peasants ground into daily bread are now packaged as premium superfoods. While flax provided medieval families with both sustenance and clothing, there was another plant that added bright, tangy flavor to their often bland meals. Medieval peasant meals could be pretty bland affairs, consisting mainly of bread, porridge, and whatever vegetables could be stretched into filling portions. Sorrel was like having a medieval flavor enhancer that grew wild and free, sprouting from the ground with an attitude and a tangy punch that could wake up any boring soup. This leafy green had a distinctive sour taste from natural oxalic acid, the same compound that gives lemons their pucker power. Medieval cooks learned that just a handful of sorrel leaves could brighten up an entire pot of dreary vegetable soup. The plant's sharp, acidic flavor cut through heavy, starchy meals and made simple ingredients taste more complex. Fresh sorrel leaves were tender enough to eat raw when young, perfect for simple salads or eating straight from the plant when peasants needed a quick snack while working in the fields. Sorrel soup was probably the closest thing medieval peasants had to fast food, except it was actually good for you and didn't come with a side of regret. The vitamin C content in sorrel was substantial, helping medieval people avoid scurvy during months when other sources were unavailable. Unlike some vitamin C sources that required special preparation, sorrel could be eaten fresh whenever it was growing. Sorrel also provided fiber and potassium, supporting digestive health and proper muscle function for people doing physical labor all day. It was basically the gift that kept on giving, like a reliable friend who shows up every spring without needing an invitation. What made sorrel especially valuable was its growing habits as a perennial that came back year after year without replanting. Medieval gardeners appreciated that sorrel could grow in poor soil where other plants struggled. The plant produced leaves continuously throughout the growing season, allowing families to harvest fresh sorrel regularly rather than waiting for a single large harvest. This steady production meant sorrel could provide ongoing flavor enhancement for meals over many months. Medieval French cooks were basically doing what modern chefs charge extra for, except they were using weeds from their backyard instead of exotic ingredients flown in from distant countries. French medieval cuisine made particularly good use of sorrel, developing recipes that are still popular today. Medieval kids were basically eating nature's sour candy, except it was actually nutritious. Children often enjoyed eating sorrel leaves straight from the plant because of their interesting sour taste. Modern restaurants now feature sorrel in upscale dishes. The same wild plant that medieval peasants gathered from fields is now considered a gourmet ingredient. While sorrel added bright flavor to medieval meals, peasants needed something more substantial to provide lasting energy for their demanding physical work. When medieval peasants needed a grain that could power them through long days of backbreaking work, they turned to one of humanity's oldest and most reliable crops. If grains were people, wheat would be the popular kid everyone talks about, but barley would be the steady friend who always shows up when you need help moving. Medieval peasants grew barley because it could handle tough conditions that would make other grains give up. Poor soil, unpredictable weather, and less than perfect farming tools were no match for hardy barley plants. This reliability was crucial for families who couldn't afford crop failures. Medieval peasants were basically eating the original slow-release energy food, except it came from fields instead of sports nutrition companies. Barley provided lasting energy with high fiber content that helped people feel satisfied longer and maintained steady blood sugar levels throughout long working days. Medieval cooks used barley in countless ways, with porridge being most common. Barley porridge was heartier and more filling than other grain porridges, providing substantial nutrition that could sustain people through hours of physical labor. The real magic of barley happened when medieval brewers figured out how to turn it into beer, which was probably one of humanity's greatest discoveries after fire and the wheel. Medieval beer was often safer to drink than water and provided calories and nutrition that helped sustain people through difficult times. Barley stews were perfect for stretching small amounts of meat or vegetables into filling meals for large families. The grain would absorb flavors from other ingredients while adding its own nutty taste and substantial texture. The beta-glucan fiber in barley provided benefits that medieval people could observe even if they couldn't explain the science. People who ate barley regularly seemed to have better digestive health and more stable energy levels. Modern research has confirmed that beta-glucan helps lower cholesterol and supports heart health. Medieval pantries were basically grain storage facilities, and barley was one of the most reliable residents. The grain could be dried and stored for months without spoiling, providing food security through winter and early spring when fresh crops weren't available. Medieval healers used barley water as a remedy for various ailments. This involved boiling barley in water to create a nutritious drink that was easy to digest and helpful for people recovering from illness. Modern barley production continues worldwide, with the grain still valued for brewing, animal feed, and human consumption. The same grain that medieval peasants turned into essential nutrition continues to be central to beer production today. While barley provided steady energy and reliable nutrition, medieval peasants had discovered another plant that offered even more nutritional value than most cultivated vegetables. Medieval peasants had a secret weapon in their fight against hunger and malnutrition, hiding in plain sight next to their cultivated crops. This humbleweed was basically nature's way of saying that sometimes the best things in life really are free. You just have to know where to look. What made lamb's quarters extraordinary wasn't just that it grew everywhere without help. This wild green was actually more nutritious than most vegetables medieval peasants were working hard to cultivate. Pound for pound, lamb's quarters contained more iron, calcium, protein, and vitamin A than spinach. The plant was basically the medieval equivalent of a vegetable that came with its own instruction manual written in the language of common sense. Medieval families discovered that lamb's quarters could be eaten both raw and cooked, giving them flexibility in meal preparation. The iron content was particularly important for medieval people, especially women and children who were often iron deficient. This wild green provided more bioavailable iron than many other plant sources, helping prevent fatigue and weakness. The protein content was surprisingly high for a leafy green, which would have shocked medieval peasants if they'd known they were getting protein from what they considered a weed. Medieval cooks learned that lamb's quarters seeds were also edible and nutritious, similar to quinoa. What medieval peasants appreciated most was lamb's quarters' reliability during crop failure or food scarcity. When carefully tended vegetables failed due to weather or disease, lamb's quarters would still be growing strong in disturbed soil. Lamb's quarters was basically the ultimate survivor plant, showing up wherever humans had been and offering free nutrition to anyone smart enough to recognize its value. The same weed that most people spray with herbicides turns out to be more nutritious than expensive organic greens they buy at specialty stores. The plant's distinctive diamond-shaped leaves with white undersides made it easy to identify, even for children learning to forage. Modern nutritional analysis has confirmed what medieval peasants observed. Lamb's quarters is now recognized as one of the most nutritionally dense wild edibles available. These 10 remarkable plants represent the botanical wisdom that medieval peasants accumulated through centuries of necessity. Each superfood provided essential nutrition when food security was never guaranteed, offering lessons that remain valuable today as these same plants continue to grow wild around us.